It was Christmas Eve, and the Thompson family was enjoying dinner together. The fireplace crackled in the corner, Christmas music played softly in the background, and the warm glow of the tree lit up the living room. It felt like the perfect holiday evening. They were laughing, sharing stories, and enjoying the rare moment of being all together. But everything changed when Mark, the eldest son, looked out the window. "Dad," Mark said, "there's someone outside." Greg, the father, got up and walked over, expecting to see a neighbor or maybe some teenagers playing a prank. But what he saw made him stop cold. A man in a plain white mask stood at the edge of the yard, perfectly still. His breath fogged the air, but he didn't move. Before Greg could say anything, another figure appeared, but this one looked taller, wearing a different mask, and then another. By the time Greg closed the curtains, there were 6 of them, scattered around the yard, all staring at the house. "Is it some kind of prank?" Sarah, Greg's wife, asked nervously. She grabbed her phone to call the police, but her face paled. "No signal," she said. Greg checked his own phone. Nothing. Then the knocking started. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't loud. It was slow and deliberate. A soft tap on the windows and doors. The family froze, listening as the knocking moved around the house, one window to the next, then the front door, then the back. The youngest daughter, Emma, clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Who's out there?" Greg shouted. No answer, just the steady tapping. Greg pulled the curtains tighter, but the noise only grew louder. Then it changed. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was scraping metal on glass. The sound was horrible, like nails on a chalkboard, and it was everywhere at once. The power suddenly went out, plunging the house into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the Christmas tree and the colored lights outside. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the window in the kitchen shattered. Greg grabbed the fireplace poker, his hands trembling as he edged toward the noise. "Stay here," he whispered to Sarah. He moved through the house slowly, his breath fogging in the cold air coming through the broken window. But when he reached the kitchen, there was nothing there, just shards of glass on the floor. Then the front door slammed shut. Greg ran back to the living room, his heart pounding, but when he looked outside, the yard was empty. The masked figures were gone. The only trace of them was a circle of footprints in the snow surrounding the house. The family didn't sleep that night. Even when the police arrived hours later, they found no sign of the intruders. No masks, no tools, nothing. To this day, the Thompsons don't know who or what was outside their home that Christmas Eve. But every Christmas since, they've wondered what would have happened if the power hadn't come back on, or if they hadn't locked the doors. One thing is for sure, Christmas has never felt the same. It was Christmas Eve, and the Mitchell family was enjoying a peaceful evening at home. The tree was glowing, stockings hung by the fire, and the house was filled with the smell of cinnamon. Ben and Claire were on the couch, watching their kids run around the living room, excited for the holiday. It seemed like the perfect Christmas night. At around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Ben frowned, wondering who would be visiting so late. "I'll get it," he said whilst heading toward the door. He opened it to find a man standing on the porch. He looked rough and haggard with dirty clothes and a tired, almost desperate look in his eyes. "Sorry to bother you," the man said in his voice shaky. "I've had a car accident nearby and I'm out of gas. Could I use your phone to call for help?" Ben hesitated. The man's appearance gave red flag signs, but it was Christmas Eve and he didn't want to be rude. "Sure," he said, stepping aside to let him in. The man stepped into the warm living room. He looked around whilst looking around at the tree and the decorations. Claire gave Ben a quick look but said nothing. Something wasn't right about this whole situation. Ben handed the man the phone, but the man didn't immediately dial. He just stared at the phone for a few moments, then muttered, "Never mind," and handed it back. "Wait, are you sure you're all right?" Ben asked in a cautious tone. The man nodded quickly. "I'm fine. Thanks for the help," he said in a low voice whilst backing out the door. Ben closed the door. He was still feeling uneasy. "That was strange," Claire said, but they didn't think much of it. The kids were getting sleepy, so they decided to enjoy the rest of the night in peace. The next morning, everything changed. A police officer knocked on their door. "I'm sorry to bother you, but we're investigating a series of robberies in the area," the officer explained. "We've had reports of a man pretending to be stranded and asking to use phones, but it turns out he's been scoping out homes and robbing them later." Ben's stomach sank. "Wait, the guy from last night?" The officer nodded. "Yes, we've been looking for him. He's been casing houses, using the excuse of needing help to get inside and look around." Claire's face went pale. "He was in here?" The officer grimly confirmed it. "He's been doing this all over the neighborhood. He looks for homes like yours, families busy with Christmas." Ben and Claire exchanged a horrified look. They had let a criminal into their home without even realizing it. If they had been a little more distracted, or had been even a few minutes later, things could have gone terribly wrong. From that Christmas on, Claire never answered the door at night, especially not on Christmas Eve. She couldn't shake the feeling of what almost happened and what they narrowly escaped. The Christmas stranger had come too close to ruining their holiday, and they knew they'd been lucky. It was a snowy Christmas Eve, and the Williams family was gathered around the fireplace enjoying the warmth of their home. The kids, Ellie and Luke, were buzzing with excitement, awaiting their Christmas morning surprises. The tree was decorated beautifully with gifts stacked high, and the smell of fresh cookies filled their home. Around 9 p.m., just as they were settling in to watch their favorite Christmas movie, the doorbell rang. Ben stood up and walked to the door, expecting it to be a neighbor stopping by to drop off a last-minute gift. But when he opened the door, his heart skipped a beat. Standing on the porch was a man dressed in a full Santa suit. He had the classic red outfit, a white beard, and black boots that shined in the light of the porch lamp. But there was something didn't feel right about him. His eyes didn't sparkle like the jolly old man in the movies. "Ho, ho, ho, ho," the man said in a voice deep. "Merry Christmas. I've got a special gift for you all." Ben felt uneasy. Thanks, but we weren't expecting any visitors tonight," he said, trying to be polite. The man chuckled, his voice changing into an unsettling tone. "Oh, don't worry. I'm just here to spread some holiday cheer. Let me in for just a moment. I promise it'll be worth your while." Before Ben could respond, the man stepped past him and into the foyer. Ben hesitated as he felt something was off, but the man's cheerful attitude made him second-guess and let him in. "Can I get you something to drink?" Ben offered in a wary tone. He wasn't sure why, but he felt uncomfortable letting this man in. "No need for drinks," the man replied, his grin never fading. "I've already got everything I need right here." Ben's unease grew as the man's presence seemed to fill the entire room. He was taller than Ben had expected, and was towering over him in a way that seemed too intimidating for someone dressed as Santa. Luke and Ellie peeked around the corner, curious about the visitor. The man's eyes flickered towards them, and for a split second Ben saw something dark in his gaze. "That's a nice family you've got here," the man said, stepping closer to the kids. "Santa always loves to visit happy families." Ben quickly stepped between the man and his kids. "I think you should leave now," Ben said in a voice firm. "I don't know who you are, but I don't appreciate you coming in uninvited." The man's grin faltered for just a second, and that's when Ben noticed the faint bulge under his suit. Something that didn't look like presents. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a strange Santa, it was something far worse. The man took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right. I'm just trying to spread a little holiday cheer. But you're right, maybe this isn't the time. I'll leave you to your festivities." Ben quickly closed the door behind him, his heart pounding in his chest. Through the frosted glass of the door, he saw the man step away from the porch. The man didn't walk away like someone leaving. He sort of lingered at the edge of the yard with his eyes never leaving the house. Ben locked the door and bolted all the windows. "Call the police," he whispered to Claire, who had been watching from the living room. The man dressed as Santa remained outside for what felt like hours, staring at their house. When the police arrived, they found nothing but footprints in the snow leading away from the porch and no sign of the Santa imposter. That night, the Williams family stayed huddled together in the living room, unable to shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The man in the Santa suit had vanished, but the unease lingered in the air. It was Christmas Day. Sarah and James were on their way to Sarah's parents' house for the big family dinner. The car was packed with gifts, and in the back seat was a steaming casserole wrapped carefully to keep warm. The snow had fallen lightly overnight, creating a picturesque winter scene as they drove through the quiet country roads. The radio played classic Christmas songs, and they were both in a festive mood, excited to spend the evening with family. They were about halfway to her parents' house when things started to get a bit odd. The road was narrow, lined with tall trees that seemed to stand still. Then out of nowhere, Sarah noticed a group of people up ahead, standing right in the middle of the road. She squinted, trying to figure out who they were. As they got closer, she realized the group was dressed in matching green and red elf suits, complete with jingle bells, pointy ears, and oversized hats. It looked like something out of a Christmas parade, but there was no parade here, just a group of 5 or 6 people blocking the road, standing in a tight line. "What's going on?" Sarah asked. James slowed the car as they approached, unsure if it was some sort of bizarre holiday prank or something else entirely. The elves didn't move. They simply stared at the car as it came to a stop. The one at the front was a tall man with a scruffy beard. He stepped forward towards us. His eyes were wide and strangely intense. "We're here to spread Christmas cheer," he said. His voice almost sounded too cheerful. Sarah looked at James, her unease growing. "This is strange," she whispered. "Yeah," James muttered. "Just wait here. I'll ask them what they want." Before he could get out of the car, another elf, a woman this time, stepped closer to the window. "It's a wonderful day for a Christmas celebration, don't you think?" she asked whilst tapping on the glass lightly. Yeah, it's beautiful," Sarah said, trying to be polite. "But we really need to get through. We're on our way to a family dinner." The elf woman's smile didn't fade. Instead, it stretched unnervingly wide. "Oh, we wouldn't want to spoil the Christmas spirit, would we? Not yet." The tension in the car grew thick. James's hand hovered over the door handle, but he didn't move. Suddenly, the first elf, the man, spoke again. "You have a wonderful dinner waiting, right? Why don't you come out and join us for a little while? Just a small detour to make your Christmas even more special." "Look, we really can't stay," Sarah said. "Please move. We're in a hurry." The man's eyes hardened and his smile faltering for a brief second. "Oh, don't worry, you'll stay. You're not going anywhere." At that moment, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The other elves started to close in on the car. Their movements was oddly slow. James slammed the car into reverse, his heart pounding out of his chest. But just as he hit the gas, the group of elves stepped back, and the man raised his hand to stop him. "No need for that," the man said calmly. "You'll stay, and when you're ready, you can go. It's just Christmas. A little detour won't harm anyone." Before either of them could say anything more, the elves stepped aside and the road was clear. They didn't say a word more, just stood there staring as the car slowly rolled forward. As they drove off, neither Sarah or James spoke. You could hear a pin drop from the silence in the car. They didn't know what had just happened, but they knew they were never going to forget the strange group of elves blocking their way on Christmas Day. It was Christmas Eve and Mia was spending it alone for the first time. Her parents had gone on a holiday cruise. Her sister was celebrating with her in-laws and her closest friends were all tied up with family plans. It didn't bother her too much as she was looking forward to a quiet night with a steaming cup of hot cocoa, her favorite Christmas movies, and the warm glow of her tree filling the room. Outside, the snow blanketed the neighborhood. At around 11 p.m., just as Mia was curling up on the couch, the doorbell rang. Who would be visiting this late on Christmas Eve? Her street was usually silent this time of night, especially with the weather keeping most people indoors. The sound startled her as she wasn't expecting anyone, and she lived in a neighborhood where surprise visitors were rare. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of her. When she opened the door, the icy wind hit her immediately, but the porch was empty. She stepped forward and looked around. As she was looking, her eyes spotted a small gift box sitting on the welcome mat, wrapped neatly in red paper with a green ribbon. She picked it up, looking for a note or clue about who had left it. The street was empty, and the snow untouched except for a faint trail of footprints leading away from her house. Bringing the gift inside, she locked the door behind her and placed the box on the coffee table. Attached to the ribbon was a small card. It read, "For you," from a secret admirer. Mia laughed nervously, assuming it had to be a joke. Maybe one of her friends was trying to mess with her. She looked at her phone, half expecting a text. but there was nothing. Curiosity got the better of her, so she carefully opened the box. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. The picture was of her sitting right there on her couch, taken from outside her window. She stared at it, barely knowing what to think. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She realized that someone had been watching her from outside. Her pulse quickened as she glanced at the window. The curtains were wide open and the flashing lights of her tree reflected in the glass. She jumped up and yanked them closed. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, making her heart skip a beat. The message was from an unknown number. It read, "Do you like your gift?" Her stomach churned as she typed back, "Who is this?" She waited, staring at the screen, but no reply came. She felt exposed and vulnerable. Her cozy night had turned into a waking nightmare. Minutes ticked by. By this point, Mia turned on every light in the house, making sure all the doors and windows were locked. The snow was falling heavier now, covering the footprints she had seen earlier. She tried to calm herself by telling herself it was a prank. Then her phone buzzed again. Another text, "I'm closer than you think." She froze, gripping the fireplace poker for protection. She backed away from the windows. The cozy warmth of her home was now gone. A sudden knock shattered the silence coming from the back door. She froze, her heart pounding in throughout her body. The knock came again, but harder this time. "I'm calling the police!" she shouted, hoping to scare the person away. The knocking stopped. Silence hung in the air. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, where the frosted window on the back door showed the faint outline of something. She crept closer, and there was another gift box sitting on the step outside. She didn't dare open the door. Instead, she turned and bolted back to the living room, locking herself in. With trembling hands, she dialed 911. The operator assured her that officers were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. She huddled in the corner, clutching the poker tightly. When the police finally arrived, they found nothing. All they could do was check around the property to make sure no one was still there. Mia never spent Christmas alone again. And every year as the snow begins to fall, she makes sure her curtains are tightly drawn, her doors are locked, and she never answers the door after dark.